Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh and salam sejahtera. Okay, in this video, we are going to learn chapter 7, managing project risk. So, this chapter will focus on project risk management, right? Okay, learning objectives. Uh, After we go through this chapter, you should be able to describe the project risk management planning framework introduced in this chapter. You can apply risk identification tools and understand the causes, effects, and the integrative nature of a project risk. You also can apply several qualitative and quantitative analysis techniques that can be used to prioritize and analyze various project risks. Okay, you can describe the various risk strategies such as insurance, avoidance, or mitigations. You can describe risk monitoring and control. The last one, you can describe risk evaluation in terms of how the entire risk management process should be evaluated in order to learn from experience and to identify best practices. Okay, okay, let's start with the project risk. Usually, every project has its own risk, right? So, you as a project manager, for example, must always plan on managing project risk before you start the project. Okay, you have to try learn from past experience and understand the project risk. Okay, based on study from the past experience, uh, these are the common mistakes in managing project risk. Okay, not understanding the benefits of risk management, okay, meaning that the project manager did not understand the project risk. Okay, not providing adequate time for risk management. Okay, this is the situation when project manager did not slot in risk management in their project plan. Okay, not identifying and assessing risk using a standardized approach, meaning that project manager only react based on ad hoc. Okay, uh, normally they will think how to overcome the risk when something has gone wrong. Okay, this is only an overview of common mistakes by project manager in managing project risk, right? So, what is effective and successful risk management? Okay, effective and successful risk management basically requires commitment by all the stakeholders, especially project management and clients. Okay, stakeholder responsibility, meaning that stakeholders not just committed, but must also be responsible to what has happened or gone wrong. Okay, different risks for different types of projects. Basically, we must always remember that every project has its own unique risk, right? So, not all project risks can be treated the same way, but the approach can be the same. Okay, I think that's all. Okay, now let's take a look on the definition of risk by PM Book Guide. PM Book is an acronym of Project Management Body of Knowledge. It is a set of standard terminology and guidelines for project management produced by Project Management Institute. Okay, you can find the details in the internet if you want to know furthermore about PMI and PM book. Okay, uh, okay. PM book define risk as an uncertain event or condition that, if occurs, has a positive or negative effect on one or more of the project objectives, such as scope, schedule, cost, and quality. Okay, in this definition, it is basically focused on the event or condition, okay, that give impacts to any of project objectives. Either give impacts to project scope. Okay, for example, the client want you to add more function to a system, or give impact to a project schedule. For example, COVID-19 pandemic caused the project delayed. okay, or to project cost. For example, the rising USD rate increased the cost of software license for system development, and also the project quality. Okay, for example, changes in functionality requires changes in software design. So any of these things, if it happen, it is a project risk and can give impact to the project objectives. Okay. Okay, next is project risk management processes, right? Okay, the processes basically very understand. Okay, you start with create a risk plan, and then you identify risk, analyze the risk, okay, develop the strategies, monitor and control risk, and finally you respond and evaluate the response to risk. Right? Okay, we start with the first step of project risk management processes, okay, which is create a risk plan. Okay, basically, this is a crucial activity in project planning, which requires firm commitment by all stakeholders to the entire risk management approach. Okay, the risk management should align throughout the organization, meaning that you have to get involved all relevant parties in the risk management. Okay, and when you do risk planning, you must focus on the preparation, right? Systematic preparation and planning can help minimize adverse effects on the projects while taking advantage of opportunities as they arise. Okay, meaning that you have to plan the risk. Okay, you have to know the potential problems that will happen and what is your preparation to settle it. All these must be prepared and documented in project management, right? Okay, now we go to the second step, which is identify risk through a project risk identification framework. All right. Okay. Basically, this diagram gives you an overview on the components of risk identification, so that you are guided throughout the risk identification process. Okay. It is basically start with the MOV. Okay. As you know that the MOV is the project objectives, which cover scope, quality, schedule, and budget, right? So, in order to make sure you achieve the project objective, you have to get involved stakeholders, internal and external parties in the risk management. Okay, together with the stakeholders, you have to identify and think about the known risks, okay, unknown known risks, and unknown risks, right? So all these activities start from the development of project charter until project closing. Okay, this is what the frame tells you in this diagram. Okay, we can also identify risk through risk identification tools and techniques, such as learning cycles, brainstorming, nominal group technique, Delphi technique, interviews, checklist, SWOT analysis, cause and effect, aka Fishbone or Ishikawa, and also the past project. So, in this chapter, we only touch on the nominal group technique, checklist, SWOT analysis, and cause and effects, aka Fishbone or Ishikawa. Okay? The rest you may study by yourself. All right. Okay, we start with nominal group technique. Uh, how we want to use this technique? Okay, basically, firstly you have to form a group. Okay, then in this group, each individual silently writes their ideas on a piece of paper, and then the idea written on the board or flip chart, one at a time in a round robin fashion, until each individual has listed all of his or her ideas. Okay. The group then discussed and clarifies each of the ideas, and then each individual silently ranks and prioritizes the ideas. Okay, the group then discussed the ranking and priorities. Then each individual ranks and prioritizes the idea against. And the last one is the rankings and prioritization are summarized for the group. Okay, this is how nominal group technique works. Right, it is quite easy to conduct, but you have to practice for doing this technique. All right. Okay, next is the second technique for identifying risk, which is a checklist. Okay, meaning that you have to identify all the risks based on the given checklist. Okay, here are the example of risk checklist for you to start identifying the risk. Okay, for example, funding for the project has been secured, funding for the project is sufficient, funding for the project has been approved by senior manager, and so on. You can read this. Okay, now the third technique for identifying risk, which is SWOT analysis. Okay, for this technique, we use a quadrant diagram. Okay, which is each box we will list the risk, which is based on strength in quadrant 1, weakness in quadrant 2, opportunities in quadrant 3, and threats in quadrant 4. Right? So strength and weakness is basically the internal risk factors. Opportunities and threat are external risk factors. Okay. Okay. Now, in strength, you have to list out your project strength. Okay. For example, you have experienced project team. Okay. In the weakness, you have to list out your project weakness. For example, you have a limited project budget. Okay. Opportunities, you have to list out your opportunities. Okay. For example, your project got strong support from users. And threats, for example, you list out the threats such as other companies in the same industry have a cheaper solution. Okay. I think with the examples, I hope you can get a better understanding about the SWOT analysis technique. All right. Okay. The last technique that we are going to learn is cause and effect technique, aka fishbone or Ishikawa diagram. Okay. And Ishikawa diagram is basically used to show the causal factors that go into some final outcome. Okay. It is often related to a production or design problem. Okay, so to make an Ishikawa diagram, you have to form up a group. Okay, and then your group will need a whiteboard. Okay, first the group should agree on a problem statement. Okay, which is the effect. Okay, for example, as shown in this diagram, we agreed on the key project team member lists. Okay, right at the center right of the whiteboard. Okay, and draw a box. Okay, draw a box around it and draw a horizontal arrow running to it. Okay, and then brainstorm the major categories of causes of the problem. Use generic heading. Okay, for example, poor performance, better opportunity, poor team environment, and job burnout. Okay, and then write the category of causes or as branches from the main arrows. Okay, this one. Okay, then brainstorm all the possible causes of the problem. Okay, ask why does this happen. Okay, this is as each idea is given, the facilitator write it as a branch from the appropriate category. Okay, causes basically can be written in several places if they're related to several categories. Okay, uh, and again ask why this happened. Okay, about each cause. Write sub causes branching of the causes, right, like this. Okay. And continue to ask why and generate deeper levels of causes. Okay, layer of branches indicate causal relationships. Okay, and then when the group runs out of idea, just focus attention to place on the chart where ideas are fused. Okay, that's all about technique for identifying risk. I think next we learn about how to analyze the risk. Okay. Okay, step 3 in project risk planning process is analyze risk, right? This step basically requires risk be analyzed to determine what threat or opportunities require attention or response. Okay, so for doing risk assessment, you have to focus on prioritizing risk so that an effective strategy can be formulated for those risks that require response. Okay, uh, the formula to analyze risk is risk equal to factor of probability multiply impact. All right. So it depends on stakeholder risk tolerances, uh, and can respond to all risks. Okay. Okay, there are two basic approaches to analyzing and assessing project risk. Okay, the first one is qualitative analysis, which is assessment based on experience or judgment. The second approach is qualitative analysis, which is based on statistical techniques. Right? Okay, for qualitative analysis, you can use one of these approaches. Okay, expected value and payoff tables, decision table, or risk impact table and ranking, and Tusler risk classification. Okay, so from the analysis, you will know which risk require response. Okay, this is the example of risk analysis using payoff table. Okay, you may use this table if you want to determine the expected return of payoff associated with several possible outcomes or events. Okay, this is the sample of decision tree analysis. Similar to a payoff table, a decision tree provides a visual or graphical view of various decision and outcomes. Okay, it is also quite similar to a flowchart. Okay, which is each branch represents an option and outcomes. Right? Okay, this is a sample of risk impact table and risk ranking. Okay, the risk impact table is a useful tool for analyzing and prioritizing various project risks. Alright, so you can look at this table. A left-hand column of table lists the possible risks that were identified, while the second column lists the probabilities for each of the risks. So the next column provides potential impact associated with the risk event occurring. So once a probability and an impact are assigned to each risk event, they are multiplied together to come up with a risk score. Okay, so once a risk score is computed for each risk, the risk can be ranked or prioritized as in risk ranking table. Okay. Okay, now we'll move on to quantitative approaches. Quantitative approaches to project and risk analysis include mathematical or statistical techniques that allow us to model a particular risk situation. Okay, probability distribution can be discrete or continuous. Discrete probability distribution use only integer or whole numbers where fractional values are not allowed. Okay, for example, flipping a coin would allow only two outcomes, okay, head or tails. Okay, uh, this diagram shows binomial probability distribution of flipping a coin. Okay, um, continuous probability distributions are useful for developing risk analysis models when an event has an infinite number of possible values within a stated range. Okay, three common continuous probability distribution used in modeling risk are normal, bird, and triangular distributions. Okay. Okay, this is a sample of normal distribution with a bell curve. All right, because the distribution is symmetrical, the following probability rules of thumb apply. About 60% of all the value will fall between uh, plus minus one standard deviation of mean, about 95% plus minus two standard deviation of the mean, and 99% plus minus 3 standard deviation of the mean. Okay, this is a per distribution. Okay, basically using per distribution, you can find a probability by calculating the area under the curve. However, the per distribution use a 3-point estimate where uh, A denotes an optimistic estimate, B denotes a most likely estimate, C denotes a pessimistic estimate. Okay. Therefore, the mean for the per distribution is per mean equal to, in bracket, plus 4b plus c divided by 6. Okay, I believe you are familiar with this formula. All right, because we have used this formula for calculating a critical path in chapter 6, right? Okay. Okay, a triangular distribution or triangle also use 3-point estimates similar to the per distribution. However, the weighting for the mean and standard deviation are different, where trying mean equal to, in bracket, A plus B plus C divided by 3. Okay, that's all. Okay, simulations. Uh, in general, when people want to study a particular phenomenon, they pick a random sample, right? Okay, for example, if you want to know more about the customer satisfaction or consumer taste, you could survey a certain number of randomly selected customers and then analyze their responses, right? Okay, for Monte Carlo simulation, uh, it is a technique that randomly generates specific values for a variable with a specific probability distribution. Okay, um, the simulation goes through a specific number of iterations or trials and records the outcome. Okay, risk version 6 basically is add-in to Microsoft Project that lets you analyze risk using Monte Carlo simulations. Okay, risk normally shows you virtually all possible outcomes for any situation, and tells you how likely they are to occur. Okay, this means you can judge which risks to take on and which ones to avoid. Okay, critical insight into this uncertain world. Okay, you can, for further details, you may explore at this link. Okay, about Monte Carlo simulation. Okay, this is the sample graphic displays using a risk for Monte Carlo simulation. Okay, this is the cumulative probability distribution from the Monte Carlo simulation as well. Okay, and this one is a tornado graph, also from the Monte Carlo simulation. Okay, now step 4 in project risk planning process, which is develop risk strategies. Okay, the purpose of the risk analysis and assessment is to determine what opportunities and threats should be addressed. Okay, so it is not feasible to respond to every threat or opportunity identified, because of avoiding all threats or chasing after every opportunity requires resources to be diverted from the real project work. Okay, um, therefore, the risk strategy to a particular risk is depends on the nature of a risk itself. Okay, is this really a threat or an opportunity for a project? Okay, impact of the risk on the project's MOV and objective. Okay, what is the likelihood of this occurring? And if this risk occurs, how will the project be affected? Okay, the project constraints in terms of scope, schedule, budget, and quality requirements can response to a particular threat or opportunity be made within the available resources and constraints of the project. Okay, uh, risk tolerances or preferences of the project stakeholders is about how much risk is each stakeholder willing to tolerate. Right. So strategies to respond to opportunities with potential positive impacts on the project goals and objectives. Uh, the first one is the exploitation. Okay, this strategy attempts to take advantage of the situation to ensure that the opportunity is realized. For example, a project team may take advantage of a new systems development methodology or tool to reduce development time or cost. Okay, the next one is sharing of ownership. Okay, in this case, an opportunity may be shared with another party who can better capture the benefit of the positive event. Okay, this could include partnership or joint ventures with vendors or customers. Okay, so the third one is acceptance. Okay, um, this implies that the project manager and project team members minds are open-minded in order to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. Okay. Okay, response to a particular risk in terms of a threat may follow one of the following strategies. Okay, the first one is accept or ignore. Management reserves, which is usually released by senior management. Contingency reserve, usually it is part of a project's budget. Okay, contingency plans, we also call it a plan B in case of a particular risk occurs. Okay, avoidance, meaning that to eliminate the possibility of the risk occurring, mitigate, to reduce the likelihood or impact, or both. Okay, transfer, you, meaning that you transfer the risk to another party. For example, you take an insurance for your project. Okay. Okay, now is a step 5 in project risk planning process, which is monitor and control risk. Okay, risk monitoring and control basically should be a part of the overall monitoring and control of the project. Okay, once the risk response plan is created, the various risk triggers must be monitored continually to keep track of the various project risks. Okay, so these are the tools for monitoring and controlling project. Okay, the first one, risk audits. Okay, it is external to project team, meaning that risk audits are conducted by people outside the project team. Okay, risk reviews, it is can conduct internally by the project team. Risk status meeting and reports, it is similar to a risk review, which is a monitoring and control system, should provide a formal communication system for monitoring and control project risk. Okay. Okay, now is the final step in project risk planning process, which is respond and evaluate response to risk through a risk response plan that includes a trigger which flags that the risk has occurred. Okay, an owner of the risk, for example, the person or group responsible for monitoring the risk and ensuring that the appropriate risk response is carried out. Okay, a response based on one of the 4 basic risk strategy, which is accept, avoid, mitigate, or transfer. And the last one is adequate resources, which is the resources must be available and used to respond to the risk. Okay, you can see this table of risk response plan. Okay. Okay, for risk evaluation, lessons learned can lead to the identification of best practices that can be shared throughout the project organization. Right? So, in summary, lessons learned and best practices help us to increase our understanding of IT project risk in general. Okay, to understand what information was available to managing risk and for making risk-related decision, to understand how and why a particular decision was made, to understand the implications not only of the risk but also the decision that were made, and learn from our experience so that others may not have to repeat our mistakes. Okay. I think that's all our learning for chapter 7, managing project risk. I believe at this stage, you should be able to describe the project risk management planning framework, and you also know how to apply risk identification tools. Okay. You are supposed to be able to analyze various project risks using qualitative and quantitative analysis techniques, and you can describe the various risk strategies such as insurance, avoidance, or mitigation. You also should know how monitoring and control the risk processes, and you can describe the risk evaluation uh, in terms of how the entire risk management process should be evaluated in order to learn from experience and to identify best practices. Okay, all these are objectives of these chapters, and it's covered in the project risk planning process steps. So, with that conclusions, I end this video with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you.